Thank you very much, Michael Beneville, for agreeing to come and interview me. We have an interesting relationship. It's probably the most unknown side of me, and I thought it would be interesting for us to have a conversation, and it might be a little surprise to some people that this part of my brain. But I think the great thing would be if you could tell everyone, excuse me, a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
What's such a great question. What am I doing on this planet and in this lifetime?
Well,
this turn of the cycle.
This part of it.
Well, my name's Michael Beneville. I'm an artist, designer, inventor, creator, I guess, storyteller. I have a shop here, a studio in New York City. Not a shop, but a studio. And I like to think of it as an idea manifestation machine. I've spent my 48 years of life creating it, and the last 15 really concentrated on it. And it's best described, I think, as an idea manifestation machine. Its purpose is to create the things that are in my head, but largely by commission or on commission. So we're tasked with creative challenges and problems, and then we solve and build. And there's a wide spectrum that we deliver in. I might like to say I'm agnostic to medium, although I'm a painter and love history and storytelling and all these kinds of things. But my team and I, oh goodness, at any given moment in time, we might be making a bespoke book, a clock, a machine, an immersive room, building big buildings out in Las Vegas right now. We handle a lot of projects for iHeartMedia and design their headquarters and the way they look in the world. But at the heart of the business, or at the heart of the studio, when it began, we built one-of-a-kind objects for individuals and their families around the world. And we've just always done that, just quietly and in the background. And it's maybe a 4,000 or 5,000 year old business. People have been doing that. Artists have been doing that for a long time. And I'll use this to kind of segue into my fascination with Norma Kamali and why I think when we first met, we really clicked. Artists have always been inventors also. They had to create oftentimes they had to create the medium and things that they were working in. I had a painting teacher once who said that oil paint was invented so that stuff would look better. They needed to paint armor and things like that. So literally they had to work out, how are we going to take this flat looking paint and make it shiny? And they invented oil paint and everything else that goes along with art. Well, as we started looking at our projects, I've always been somewhat of a futurist. I love sci-fi and looking forward and all of these things. And I feel present and grounded in my body always, but I feel as if I live in the past and the future at the same time when I walk through places. So my first question for you is for you to retell me the story that I remember from our first conversation of Norma working in the airline industry and staring at an early
Univac computer.
Yeah, tell me about this, because we started talking technology that day, and we're going to get into all of it, but take me back to that moment, like how, where, how, and how.
Well, I mean, first of all, just to respond to a little bit of how you described you and what you're doing, and a little bit more of what you're doing later on, but there is so many familiar statements you made about yourself that I feel about myself, and there are so many similar things that we have. I mean, it just is crazy, even to the fact that we're in the whitest white all the time, floor to ceiling, that the environment that we create has that feeling. We're thinking of the future and understanding how the past affected the future. We're in today, and we're grounded. We're not, lofty airheads, but where the future is so exciting that you lose your breath over the possibilities. So when I was at the airline, it was early in my understanding that this, and I'm sure you had your early moments too, of understanding what it was that just fascinated you about the future and what could be. And I was an art student. I wanted to be a painter. Michelangelo was my god. I had Michelangelo all over my room, Rudolf Nureyev all over my room, and I just wanted to create in his, image or something of that spirit. And so when I realized that, and I had a painting scholarship and a scholarship to FIT, and I had a horrible first job interview out of FIT. It was the most objectifying experience I had at that age. And I thought, I left crying, and I didn't want to have to deal with any of that kind of stuff in my life. And I thought, I'm going to get a job at the airlines and travel. So here I am in the office, faced with this UNIVAC computer. I never even knew what a computer was. Nobody was really talking about it. They were in schools, they were beginning in the airline industry. And here I could know what was going on the plane. Oh, a wheel fell off of the plane. Oh, something else happened, or the early flights late. And all of this information is coming through. And it just was so fascinating to me, and a total contradiction to everything that I'd been about, but I was obsessed with what this could be. And I remember big wires coming out of the floor. They were constantly opening the panels in the floors, and chunks of wires connecting these computers, and everything was new. There was always a breakdown, but when it worked, it was really, oh my God, this is really fascinating. I can know stuff that's somewhere else, and it's just coming through in type. Of course, it was like green type on a square box like this. And I still don't know how to type. And I swore I never wanted to learn, because my mother wanted me to be a secretary, just to be safe, because the painting would fall through. And so that was the first realization. What was your first realization that there was something about the future that was fascinating?
In just hearing you speak to, I just learned 5 more things that we have in common. My name is Michael, so I love Michelangelo also. By the way, have you seen the picture of the Sistine Chapel with Michelangelo? And yeah, of course you have. But have you seen it compared, the God's Cape compared to the brain?
Yes.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
What a laugh all the years later. Because of course no one was dissecting anything except for him.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But I won't get off.
Oh, I'm so glad that you feel that way.
Well, there
of
was
course.
that. Also, I was enrolled in tennis and typing camp once for a summer, and I failed miserably at both.
Funny.
And so I really do sort of tap out.
Yep.
Yeah, the typing doesn't work.
No.
And I don't know how to program or anything like that. I'm not, technology for me is not the act of creating it. Technology for me is the act of harnessing it into narrative.
Right.
But I think there's a deeper thing also. I think that, and I'll answer your question, let's see, the first time that I really understood that the world around me was changing. It's a really great question. I grew up in other countries, so the first 10 years of my life were in Africa and Lebanon and the Middle East and things. And at that time, this was the early 70s, there wasn't any TV. I mean, there was an hour of TV in Mauritius or something like that, and there was 5 minutes for kids.
Yeah.
I'd come back in the summer and binge. But so I kind of grew up isolated in a really lovely way from technology. I had this big trunk of records, because there wasn't even radio to listen to, so I learned all these songs. So technology for me was something that I would experience. I remember my father bringing home a calculator, and it must have been about 75, 76, and it was, I mean, the thing must have cost $1,000 or something like that. He was a banker. And I remember we just sat there like, oh my God, like you can add numbers and divide. I mean, it really, you can't give them away at a bank anymore. But that was my first thing, and I'm not a math guy. So it really, I had this click that, my God, something has been invented that gets around my, undiagnosed but certain dyslexia. And here's this wonderful machine that's going to allow me to do something that I'm not very good at doing. So that was my first.
The adventure of what can be, and sort of the mystery and the uncovering or getting an idea and seeing it through or taking it to the next steps. So exciting. It's probably the most exciting part of designing for me. When I'm not designing, but I'm inventing, I'm flying. I'm at the happiest point. And so here we are now, and VR and AI and all of this.
The algorithm.
Yeah, all of this otherworldly stuff is so mysterious and so exciting. I just want to be immersed totally in it. I don't want any distractions, but life goes on and you have to keep doing what you do. But the more we can have of it and the more we can understand it, I think the better it's going to be for everyone.
So to you, it's not a hostile feeling.
No. Yeah. Well, it's not to you.
It's not to me either. But I think that for a lot of people, it's an awfully scary moment in time. I wander through places a lot with the different time periods in my head, and sort of think, my God, how many people am I surrounded by who actually understand that the world around them has so profoundly changed, and how terrifying it must feel if you have no sense of what might happen.
Yeah.
And no one knows, but it's going to be science fiction.
Well,
it is.
It is science
already.
fiction.
Yeah.
So, what makes me nervous about it is the lack of information that's out there, that people can't be more educated about it to understand the power of it, and that fear is always exists where there's new ideas, and that's part of the excitement of it. But if we are afraid of anything new, then we're not going to benefit from the incredible opportunities that can be achieved because of technology, especially. So,
do you feel? I sometimes feel that our role and responsibility on my level and yours is to act as midwives to a process also. It's not to evangelize blindly, but it's to sort of build narrative and story around it so that it fits in and makes sense. And I think about, you once told me about a window that you did with the mannequins.
Right.
And tell me that again.
God, that was 95.
Yeah.
It was just about 95. So in 1995, I heard that people were able to have websites where they could communicate directly with the consumer. And it was like this freedom, because I felt so controlled by buyers who were either mathematicians or were not as experienced as I was in the world that I was in, and were sort of not really telling the story properly, and it made me crazy. And I felt like somebody had their hand over my mouth and I couldn't speak. And now I could speak directly to you. I could tell you, you could see what I wanted you to know about what I was doing. And I was like, I could not wait. And so I set up a website, and I did a window of mannequins, and I screwed monitors because they were headless mannequins, so their necks on up were these antiquated, obviously, computers, and they fit beautifully on, and they had all these wires, and I had all the wires around, and it was beautiful, actually, and the mannequins were gray, and the computers were gray, and I was talking to, like, an abandoned village because nobody had a clue of what I was doing, or like, what is this? What are those TV sets? Are they broken? I was like, no. And so I felt so happy that I could finally communicate. But then I also understood that my biggest fault is that I do things too soon because I can't wait, and I don't know how to hold back. You too, obviously.
we're thinking that all through right now
Right.
with VR and AR.
Yeah.
Mostly VR too. The tail is so long on when these things will fall. But relatively speaking, it's used to take hundreds and thousands of
Right,
years, and
now
now it
it's-
takes
yeah.
years. But for something to take 2 or 3 years to be mature is a long,
Yeah.
long time. I think about. Well, two things kind of come to mind. One is my girlfriend's obsessed with space, with astronauts and flying. And
Oh, really?
all yeah, because she's getting her pilot's license and all that. But we were down in Houston, and we've been to go to all the space places. And we went and visited Mission Control in Houston, which is just the room where all
Right.
of this came from. And there are computers in the room, but the docent there, so the guide said, now, you're thinking that these screens are all computers on the desktop. They're not. They're wired to a mainframe that was down in the basement. So it's just a screen, really. The computer was down in the basement at the time, and it was massive, this huge computer. And he said, but do you know that the entire landing on the moon was done with a computer that had the memory of 4 or 5 JPEGs photos?
Wow.
That was the storage capacity
Wow.
of
Wow.
everything.
Look
they,
at
yeah.
I mean, wow.
So this is this moment where we're set free because we both have on our table in front of us here this device that is our communicator, our wand, our alchemist tool. It's the most extraordinary.
And it's recording.
It's
us
recording
now.
and shooting. It's 2, 3, 4 of these things.
Right.
Just magic, absolute magic. The means of production suddenly in anybody's hand, anybody who can afford a phone, but that's getting to a place where that level of smartphone penetration is getting just incredible. So I don't know. I love that story about the mannequins because I think that it was a way that you communicated your vision in this artistic way, and I also love the fact that it was too early.
Yeah,
because
well,
that's kind of how.
I think it's the curse of people who can have a vision and get excited about it and can't wait to have it fit the time. And I'm trying to be more controlled about it, but I don't think that's ever going to correct. I mean, it's just, I can't help it, but that's what I love. And then there's the moment when people catch up, and it's exciting because then there's another opportunity to then tell the story again in a more mature way. But the freedom that gives you, so the freedom that the future holds of possibilities, I think is so hopeful. And just like landing on the moon or taking the space venture even further, has to be part of who we are, our identity as human beings, because if we don't explore and try new things, the possibilities then are never going to be endless. They'll always be minute and insignificant. So I love adventure, but we're both cancers, so we're also homebodies. So we have this effect of understanding humanity and nurturing at the same time, craving this desire to be in this new space. So the new space.
Yeah, I was going to ask you sort of let's take the sort of snapshot moments of calculator and airline computer, and then look at this moment in time and say, what's the equivalent?
Well,
epiphany-wise.
Yeah, I mean, so I love VR. I love the fact that people can, and it's not happening yet on a mass scale, but people can understand a situation or a concept viscerally in a way that a movie can never do, because we're watching another experience. But when you're in that movie and you're feeling everything that's going on and understanding maybe something about a culture or a concept viscerally, the impact of that can change the world. The more we know about each other, the more it will bring us together. The less we know, the more fear there is, and the more distance there is between us. And so I see VR as an opportunity to bring us together in a way that is so much a part of the way we breathe. And that has never happened before. It can happen in film, it can happen in live experiences, real experiences, but the possibilities of creating a global experience that is kind and generous and understanding, I think can happen with VR. And VR can be entertainment, but I think, and educational, but that level is where we really transform human behavior. And we are at that point where we need the tools to do that. Otherwise, we can't laugh anymore, so how can we tell stories? We can't love anymore because we're connected to devices. So this device right now is separating us from this visceral experience. So VR has to move fast to help us all come together again. But then you, of course, said, come by and visit me. I have a surprise for you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm there, Michael. You know it. And so I know your surprises are otherworldly. But my experience with you, with High Fidelity, it was so memorable and such a moving experience. And I think about so many parts of it that I want to break down and talk to you about. But maybe you can explain first. Sure. So everybody knows what I'm talking about.
I think the moment that we were experiencing there was that it's actually here. It's going to take a while for it all to really be up and running and people in it. But what is High Fidelity? High Fidelity is the brainchild and creation of a friend of mine, a guy named Philip Rosedale. And he was the creator of Second Life, which was the sort of precursor back in the day. But still, I mean, a vibrant economy and people, seeing and meeting in a parallel universe is what Second Life was.
It really is.
Yeah, it really is. It's a functioning world. There are hundreds of thousands of people in there still. And High Fidelity is his reboot for the 21st century. In VR, and it's extraordinary. It's, I think, similar to if we've read the book Ready Player One and seen the movie. It's the oasis, and it's the oasis is a place for those people who don't know it. That is a virtual world in which all worlds exist. Any kind of teaching, learning, communicating, traveling, seeing each other, dancing, all these things. You inhabit an avatar, and the avatar can look exactly like you or be your wildest fantasy of yourself. And it's not a game. It's really life.
Yeah.
It's going and meeting people. And so the thing is that when I've been following VR for years and years and years because it's the logical progression of something that I need to be able to deliver to my clients. We make books the way books have been made for thousands of years on presses that are 100 years old sometimes, and these machines. But you deal with 3 generations of a family, and the kids today don't digest their information through books, for better or for worse. They catch it off of an iPad, or there's more. They burrow into their information rather than reading it on the page. And so VR is a place where every creative expression that we've ever had is possible in this world. It's the only media that's ever been created where it encompasses all the others.
Everything.
All the others. Because you can read a book in there, and you can paint in there, and you can do anything. And the odd thing about it, too, is that our whole way of interacting with books and film is that our minds do this wonderful trick of convincing us that we're not in the room, we're in the book.
Right.
We're there with Huckleberry Finn or whoever it is. Or we're not in the movie theater, we're in the movie, even though we perceive that there are chairs left and right. In VR, your brain is doing the exact opposite. It's trying to work out
why
I was in a conference room, and now I'm in this completely parallel world, which I think is one of the growing pains too
of learning
how our minds can adapt with that rapid a flip. It's we're incorporating. I think we've talked about it before, but we've had multiple states of being for millennia, and then recently, they've been a little more complicated. But we sleep, and in sleep we dream. We're in our mindful waking state, sort of unaltered by anything. That's another state of consciousness. We alter our consciousness with food and alcohol and drugs and all kinds of things. We alter our consciousness by reading books and seeing TV and elevating ourselves, and then meditating, I guess, and probably physically, right?
Yeah.
We can achieve all those things through, and I'm sure there are a few others. But we've never had augmented reality and virtual reality to add to those building blocks of everything that we understand.
Incredible.
It's exponential.
I think when I tried to explain this, first of all, people, and when I explain my AI experience, people are frightened for me that I'm interested in this. And like, why are you doing that? And so the whole, and I want to talk about High Fidelity a little bit more, because there's something about that experience. So yes, it was really hard. Every brain cell flipped over when I was in that world with you. And then when we came out, I had to sit and hold on to the sofa because every brain cell was going back again. I couldn't register that I was really in another world that exists with this world. And nobody, when I tell them that, nobody accepts what I said, because our brains don't really believe it. It's only a movie, it's only a story. And so that was very profound. Yeah. The other thing that I found interesting, and I think a lot about, is if we're in a parallel universe and we're interacting with strangers, and we want that experience, do you choose an avatar that is exactly like you and is as much the authentic you as possible? Or do you decide on 1 or 2 or 20 parallel universe identities? And I think that's a big deal. That's a big deal question,
very big
right?
deal, yeah.
So for me, I chose...
You had this fabulous outfit.
I
mean,
chose
you
it,
styled it right up.
I loved her. She was in this yellow bodysuit with a wig, something like my hair.
Yeah, sort of a Uma Thurman jumpsuit, yeah.
And I liked being this tough girl running around, but then I thought I feel dishonest because I wanted my authentic self to meet all of these people, and I wanted them to understand a little bit about where I was coming from. And we express ourselves, obviously, through the way we dress. You chose a jacket.
That's right.
For that jacket, for a reason. You have a story behind it. You can tell why. So there was, and that avatar looked just like you, and with time can look more and more like you. And I thought, I loved seeing you because I felt safe. It was my first time. And seeing you, I knew I was okay because you were there. And then when that first person or something popped up and kept changing what the avatar was, yeah. I had my first fearful moment because I didn't know what this person was about. I couldn't read anything. My intuitive self was totally blocked, and I didn't have a sense of it. But I felt safety with you, which is why I kept trying to be near you. And when this thing popped up and you said, "Oh, I recognize your voice," to the character, and then he kept changing his identity, that was a frightening experience for me because all of my radar and my antenna of like knowing about someone because of the visual instincts I have were totally taken away. And so I thought, well, is that what that universe is? Or am I relying on the past by wanting the avatars to look like who we are in this universe? So first of all, talk about why you chose to look like the way you do in your avatar.
Yeah, that was actually Philip's suggestion, and it's something that I think he cares about. He feels that in being the designer of a world and a universe, that we should be, I think, on some level accountable to ourselves. So while people are encouraged to, costume and be whatever, you can be a 10-foot fairy or something like that, whatever you want to be, he thinks the baseline should really be the person themselves, and we should conduct ourselves as ourselves, because it's not a game and it's not just play, and there's work and fun and conversations, and it's useful to sort of have this version of yourself. So I had myself scanned. It's a Doob scan, D-O-O-B, and I went downtown and had myself scanned. And the scan takes, I don't know, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Wow.
That's it.
Really?
Yeah. It then takes a couple of weeks for them to make the scan of you into a marionette, so that you're embodying this thing. And the first time I met myself, I actually had one of my colleagues, one of my workers, Andrew, he said, well, do you want to meet yourself by stepping into yourself, or would you like to meet yourself by finding yourself in the room? And I said, well, that's really interesting. And I said, actually, you get in it. And so the first time I saw myself activated as an avatar, I was an avatar that I'd chosen, and I went in and I instantly recognized he was the back of. It was my back was to myself, right? And then I came up, and Andrew started moving, and I could tell that I wasn't moving the way I would move. Yeah. But I could see that it was me possessed in this way. And that's, you start to get into, I realize on some level our conversation must sound bonkers
Crazy
to a lot of people.
Yeah, I know.
But there's a mirror world, is what they're calling it, that's happening. It's the third phase of something that's really rather extraordinary. We created the internet, well, The internet was created, and that's the infrastructure. People were uploaded into it in the second phase, and that's us inhabiting, making the infrastructure work. So social media and all these things are dominated by, by those companies. And now the third thing that's happening, and you can start to read articles about this, all over the place, is that every object and place in the world is now being uploaded. So very simply, that's maps and all kinds of things. But if 10,000 people are taking pictures of the Eiffel Tower, and every single one of those phones is smart, and I mean in an hour, not over the course of a year. 10,000 photographs in an hour are happening of the Eiffel Tower, and all that information is going into one place. You're constructing a live model already in a parallel this world. And so that, and then the next piece of it is every object, every piece of clothing. You asked about you commented on the jacket. I had to choose something to wear for my scan, because it was going to take this beautiful copy. I mean, you see 3D digital prints and things like that. That's what the company is. But it also does these, builds these avatars. And but you'll see, your wallet in your pocket or something. That's how detailed the scan is. It's not general at all. And so I thought, well, what should I wear? And I got some advice, and my girlfriend suggested that I wear this jacket that I have, my dad's jacket. Now, it's a Tommy Nutter suit from the 80s, I think. It was a pinstripe suit that he had made for him by this wonderful tailor back in the day on Savile Row named Tommy Nutter, who, made conservative gentlemen's suits, and then also did all the stuff for Elton John, and just radical, crazy, wild rock and roll stuff. And then suits. So I know, you know. And here's what was interesting is I just took the jacket and I wore it, and what was odd was that when I received a compliment about it when I was in High Fidelity from an Englishman who liked the cut of the lapel notch or something, I realized, oh my God, I've digitized a suit, and it's now living in a parallel world, where from the 70s, from the 70s, 80s, or something like that. And now it has this whole other existence, which, of course, the estate of Tommy Nutter should probably be calling and saying, but all of these things will have implications, because absolutely every object that we wear, interact with, a purse or whatever, will have this parallel shape. And one of the companies that I'm involved with is called Vatomic, and Vatums are virtual atoms. So they're created by a guy named Eric, and they're the digital representation of a physical object that you can find on a map, a la Pokemon, but you can also remove from the map, and you can carry that and carry these things into virtual worlds, exchange them, barter them. There's a whole level of you really start thinking about all the things that need to happen for us to find work when work is replaced by robots. By robots and things like that. I mean, to me, this feels like that world.
So the ultimate humanitarian use for something like High Fidelity, has ultimate possibilities, and I think we need to explain it a little bit more, because without really experiencing it, it just sounds like we are so freaking weird.
You're right.
And so, which we are,
but we are.
That's okay. But there's this, I think, if you were to think about how this place could serve a purpose, one of the things that I thought of, and this is just a minute thing, one of the things I thought of is someone who is so handicapped they can't move. They're isolated in a world where maybe their minds are brilliant and moving, but they physically can't move. They could go into this space and fly.
Yeah.
I mean, I was flying and I didn't want to fly, but I was flying and moving, and the opportunity, and that's just a very small concept, but that this person could be walking and jumping and dancing and flipping around, and their spirit could be set free, and they could express themselves in volumes of possibilities and potential. And that's one little thing.
It is.
But then the grand scale of the world and the universe, by having this parallel universe, has opportunities. The only thing is, I still, in order for me to visualize what those opportunities are, I keep going back to the avatar, because without the honesty of the avatar being a true replication or a true authentic version of you. I mean, your avatar had your gestures and your movements, and I'm sure they're going to be more and more evolved and almost as lifelike as we're seeing each other. But there's something about hiding behind an image, a fantasy, that I'm concerned about the honesty of it. I'm concerned about the responsibility and the importance of behavior. When you hide, like we do in our phones and social media, and these anonymous or this behavior that can hide, it just doesn't always rise to the top. And so that was my only concern, that if there are these animated figures, would I feel compelled to be protective and to sort of hide behind you? Or how would we move forward in a humanitarian, spirited way?
With accountability.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is you zero in on. There are so many fears about all of this. I mean, when you said earlier, and when you speak to your friends about being in VR experiences, and they're concerned or they're worried. I mean, one big fear that people have is that the people will disappear into it. They'll be there for all
and
their
never
life
come
and never
back.
come back. And on some level, maybe that'll happen. Although physically, it's pretty tough to be in there for more than a few hours. Anyway.
Yeah, it's
really 20 minutes,
not
half
yet,
an hour.
Not yet.
Yeah, exactly. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that codes of conduct and what you say, you go into a world that is where it's not robots and AI that's powering these particular avatars, although that'll happen also, and you won't know. But you're right. You speak differently when you think that there are no consequences to what it is that you're saying. And
So
I
it's
like
a
the
little
idea.
like the Wild West, where it's just open right now.
It's so
just open.
We should probably discuss the mechanics a little bit of just VR for people who don't
So
know
do
it. But
that,
you have a headset. One of 5 or 6 companies that have headsets, and I won't give any one of them a plug. but they're expensive. But relatively, what used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for a headset now is maybe $500 or $600, $700, something like that. And the price drops and drops and drops every few months. The problem is that to experience the really great stuff, you have to then have a $2,000 or $3,000 computer to plug it into, which that prices most of humanity out of the experience. So we're waiting. All of us are just waiting for this moment in time when the price drops to that sweet spot where it's something on the level of buying a gaming platform or something like that. $400 or $500 all in, great experience, and then all the bandwidth and 5G or whatever else is that we need to be able to do it, and globally, because you want to be able to connect with people all over the world, and you can right now. But it's so you put on your headset, and then you go into a High Fidelity in this case. Obviously, gaming and all of these things are possibilities in there too, and there are tons of different things that companies are doing.
But that's not really what the experience is.
for me and for
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
I couldn't wait to get my VR headset a few years ago, and when it arrived, I went in, and then only time I found myself in there was showing somebody how cool it was to be in an aquarium or something. But,
Right.
and that's amazing, it's wonderful,
Yeah.
it's incredible, but it didn't feel practical or useful to me. What I loved about what we've been experiencing is that it's another place, but it's a place where we are this, unbounded, unfettered creatures. And you said also about the handicapped people. I was it's interesting you said that. I was a personal care assistant for a couple of years for a guy when I was in college and just in between. And he's Joe Tringali, yeah. And he's quadriplegic, an amazing guy, amazing. And he taught me so much. And we were just communicating, we've stayed in touch, and we were just communicating a bit about VR, and he was saying that he'd been frustrated with the experience of being in VR because it's still a gaming console. And while he can push his palm enough to drive a truck, he can do that. He doesn't have the motor control to be able to actually. And I thought, he always said to me, the world really isn't handicapped. I'm not handicapped. The world is handicapped. The world could be made so that everybody could, roll through it. And I thought, yeah, that's actually a really great point. We have to be careful at this moment in time that we're inventing a whole new piece of technology in a whole other world, and yet we're doing it in a way and we're leaving people out. But aging is going to be an extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
When you think that in your 90s or your hundreds or whatever, you can be in these worlds.
Yeah, and I also think the once the price goes down, that's when the creativity begins. That's when there'll be a flood of ideas. I mean, and maybe this can be controlled just by voice or, not manually. And I think that those things will obviously come, but getting the price down, everybody wants that, because unless you can afford creativity, it just closes the door to every opportunity. And I don't want people to think that just because we were talking about the handicap, that's the only value. I think when something is affordable, that's when genius comes through and you can see the potential for so much.
Why an ad agency right now has such a hard time selling what it's done for years.
Yeah.
Making, slick commercials.
Yeah.
When, and you can have what do they call it, a predator, a producer, writer, editor, and a person with an iPhone are exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Done. I mean, that is when it becomes really, really unbound. I think too the moment that we're in also now is that we have to create experiences that mean something and that are transformative and that are accessible to lots of different people. And in the short term, this project that we're working on in Las Vegas, Area 15, is to me, the reason that we're building it is because it wants to be this sandbox, sort of palace for the human imagination that allows the general public to walk in, for free and see a world and start to acclimate to its texture and its light and all of these things. Not in VR, just as real sculptures and incredible things, and then begin to see what it's like to take on all these different layers of reality in an environment that's conducive to that play and that kind of exploration.
I think that what you're doing is so needed now. First of all, it's the ultimate creative experience, right? There's every level of touching the senses and exciting the senses and having a place like that. But I think Ian did a brilliant job with Studio 54 in creating these experiences for people that were otherworldly, and he would do it every time there was a party. And there's been sort of a gap between that intensity, which is why the memory of Studio 54 won't die. That those experiences were visceral, they were real, and they were unforgettable. And then we've had this dry period. But I think one of the benefits of having a device that we have our heads in all the time is that we are intrinsically in need of these experiences again, these stimulating experiences that excite us and change everything we've been thinking and open doors to ideas. So talk about what you are aiming to achieve there.
Sure. Well, I think rather counterintuitively, reality at this moment in time is the most immersive and virtual
Exactly.
world that we can experience. But we're sort of raising the bar on what we want reality to be like.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of I shouldn't say human beings across the world. Most human beings across the world are just hoping that it won't, rain and that there's going to be food. And I mean, really, that's the state of affairs. So it's in imagining all of these worlds, it's important to think that it's not everyone. It's at first, although I think ultimately it will be a real benefit to everyone. I think that VR is going to be like wallpaper was in the 1800s or whenever it was invented. It was murals that only kings and queens could afford, and suddenly anybody could make their home a beautiful, beautiful place.
Change the
small
environment.
and change the environment in a really powerful way. And so things like VR are I don't think it's going to be about us spending 20 hours a day in there. I think it's not going to replace our phones or books or magazines. Magazines are great by the pool, and magazines are fantastic. If they were invented today, it would be the most extraordinary technology. Oh my gosh, this is
I think you're right. I think that it's a separate thing, a separate kind of experience. So what are your thoughts about AI?
Yeah, sure. I think that. Well, I'll answer your question about Area 15 first, because
okay.
I didn't stay on point there, and it's a good question. We're building a world, this 250,000 square foot building that is not trying to be the most glitzy thing in the world. It's about raw creativity. So it's sort of the cardboard box at Christmas rather than the shiny toy, and both are really engaging. But what's so engaging about the cardboard box is how much potential there is in it for it to be so many different things. And so Area 15 is an exploration of that, and partnered with all kinds of incredible tenants and groups. We have Meow Wolf coming in, and they're our anchor tenant. And Meow Wolf is just a sort of a psychedelic playground that you experience, walk through. It just probes deep parts of the imagination, and things are possible in there. And I love that. And I love that people now want to be the center of their movie.
Yeah.
It's an odd thing, and it's happened before. We were talking about the Michelangelo and the Renaissance. That was a huge paradigm shift where human beings suddenly thought, wait, we're the story.
Yeah.
It's not about all the outside forces. We're the center of our universes, and that was a huge shift. It changed absolutely everything in our thinking. And now I think that the expectation of living in the experiential economy, say, that's growing that's a good thing. Because people want to.
Important.
Yeah, people want to live, and they feel that they deserve to. They deserve to have meaningful lives where they're affected and they affect, and it's a give and take thing. That's wonderful.
And kids have play dates that are so controlled now. I remember playing in boxes and doing things and being out with my friends and not having a controlled period of time where I had to play piano or I had to go to ballet class and do things like that. But for the most part, every day was an exploration and an experience. And then as we grow up now, and as you see generations grow up, there's still segmented experiences. And now with these mobile devices, those experiences are less and less, and there are more interactions with a device. And so I think having more of these things, including VR, are extremely healthy for our society. And I think it's a new expression of art and everything. AI, to me, is another area of extreme opportunity. And I was telling you about my tutorial with some scientists who are AI scientists, and they literally were talking to me about a project, but I asked them to give me an updated AI tutorial, because what I knew, I'm sure they knew 20 times more, and they went through AI in medicine, AI in security, AI in the arts, in music, in everything. And a lot of people know some of the things that can be done. But then there's the AI of intelligence, where you can download your brain and it can be swooshed around and then given back to you whenever you want it, for whatever reason. And that is such a breakthrough, because if you think about how emotions affect some of our decisions, and how a crisis affects a decision. And there are times where you have to make important decisions, like the head of a country has to make an important decision. If those decisions can be made without the distractions, and they're sober and clear-headed, there's tremendous value in that. And not just for a decision, but for actions and creativity and opportunities. And I am so shocked that most people know very little, if anything at all. And I am also shocked that we as a country aren't being educated or aren't wanting to know more, because other people may have more AI and intelligence or investment than we have, and that can be very dangerous for our country. So what are your thoughts about AI?
I think that I mean, you've covered so many of the key points there. I mean, most people would be surprised to know that we're already in it.
Yeah, we're in it.
We're so in it that that's probably what a lot of people fear, is that they don't understand how did I get into it, and why, and how, and why was I not consulted, and all of those things. But short of going into the past or legislating against such things, it's happening. So we're in a
train left the station
a long time ago, and jumping off the train would hurt a lot. Maybe better to sort of find a seat and get comfortable, because it is where it is where we are. It's not even where we're headed; it's where we are. Yeah. And you're so right that all the different we each have this threshold of how far we think is okay. That we just sort of everybody has that this moment that they feel like, well, that's too much. I don't want that. The way I feel about AI is that we have to find peace with it, and we have to. It is that pocket calculator, and I recognize that but it's the first time that it's ever happened to humanity. I think that where we are headed to, not quite where we are, but where we're headed to, the last time that we were affected as human beings in such a way was not the internal combustion engine or television, or it was not the unlocking of the atom, although arguably that probably is. It's fire. Yeah. I mean, fire was the last time that we received this knowledge and were so fundamentally transformed as a species. Well, and that's where we are.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's that monumental. And I also think we're experiencing disruption now, but this is going to take the disruption to another level, simply because it's not going to be about the military anymore. It's intelligence. We all know that anyway. And the thing is, dealing with the reality of it is the disturbing part, because as a superpower, where do we stand in that world, and how do we identify ourselves in that world? That's the real question. Do you have any books that you would recommend people to read who found this conversation interesting and didn't think we were like totally out of our minds?
Yeah, I think anything like Sapiens and Homo Deus and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century,
Yes.
all written by one author. Where did he come from?
I know.
How is he
I
able
know.
to express
Right.
these things? It's just, it's
Yeah.
extraordinary. But I think, the easiest way to understand VR is to read, maybe see the movie, but the book is just so much better, and it's such a page turner. But to read Ready Player One, it's a crash course in just,
What
yeah,
can be.
the dark
Yeah.
side of
Yeah.
it, but it unlocks and shows you what could happen if it wasn't the dark
Right.
side of it necessarily. It's not dark, it's just that, any technology is what we do with it. I think our fear right now is that we feel that technology is going to do something with us.
Yeah, that robots will take over.
Yeah, and I don't think robots will take over.
As long as we have the ability to think and create, we still have more power than the robot. The robot can only do what we want it to do, but AI has other possibilities, though. So we have to really be wise and smart about how we have to invest in it. We have to really get behind it and stay ahead of the game. We know China is very invested. The leader of the country is invested in it. And so because we have two parties and we have a system that's worked beautifully through the years to keep us balanced, this may take us down, because if our two parties don't agree that AI exploration is key for the future of the country, we will be behind not just one country, but several others.
Yeah.
So it is important that as a country, there is no Republican Party, Democratic Party when it comes to understanding the survival of the country as one country with a goal to protect and to actually rise up and above what AI can be.
Yeah, and I think approached with optimism.
Yes, positive.
Then no one sets out to build a polluting, rotten city.
Right.
They don't. We set out to build a beautiful world with towering skyscrapers and a place for all. Like no
Right.
one. It's that there are consequences to everything. That's the challenging part of where we are right now. But I think that if we can look at this moment, if we can find the leaders and the midwives and the people who are on some level trusted to make this a habitable place and a positive place, then yes, it solves so many issues.
Well, we're going to have to continue this
I will.
again at another time, because we will have stuff. All right, so I can't wait to hear the comments about how cuckoo we are.
We sounded pretty nuts.
But I think sometimes you have to be a little cuckoo. I look at the people who have invented some really interesting things. They are a little cuckoo, but you still can be grounded and feel free to go into some of these other places. So we just have, and we did it without drugs. Amazing.
100%. Delicious herbal tea.
Yes, the tea can take you places.
Spot on.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Norma, what a pleasure. You are divine.